Joining me now is Kalyani Pillay. She's the CEO of SABRIC. She'll be telling us more about the urgency of being FICA compliant. Kalyani, I've heard some horror stories. In our newsroom, we have a couple of colleagues that have said their accounts have been frozen because they weren't FICA compliant. Firstly, tell us, what are we aiming to do? When we talk about FICA compliance, what is it?
Well, I think the important thing for bank customers to know is that, for one, FICA imposes certain obligations on banks with regard to regulatory controls, and banks have to comply with this to ensure that they know who it is that they're dealing with. It's very important for banks to ensure that the clients that they have are known to them, in the sense that they have to have their identities made known. It has to be supported with documentation. They need to have addresses of their clients. In terms of FICA, banks need to report certain things through to the regulator. The South African Reserve Bank conducts inspections to ensure that the banks are compliant. Now, the banks can only be compliant and fully compliant over and above their own obligations in terms of policies and controls that they need to put into place. But in respect of completing the whole process, they need to have their customers actually cooperate with them and supply them with the information they need.
So what is the process? What needs to happen? How often should you be FICA'd? And this freezing of bank accounts is a last resort.
Yes.
What happens?
Yes. You know, in terms of how often you need to do it, it's an ongoing process. It's not like, with your driver's license, where you say every 5 years your driver's license needs to be renewed. It doesn't work like that with FICA. With FICA, the requirement is that the banks need to always know everything that in respect of their client, in terms of their contact details, who they are, if they're changing documents, if they're moving home, if they're changing their cell phone numbers, if they change their email address. So the very first requirement at the moment is that bank customers need to update their contact details with their banks as soon as possible if they know that the banks don't have their updated and current contact information. The reason for this is because this will enable the banks, while they're going through their processes and as they're identifying clients that are not fully FICA compliant, or where there's something missing in the documentation, or they require additional documentation, the banks need to make contact with their clients to ask them to come in.
Oh, so they have to make the contact.
They've undertaken to make contact with their clients, because everyone doesn't have to go in. A number of their clients are already FICA compliant, but there are those that are not, and these were picked up during inspections and also in terms of the bank's own processes to audit themselves to see and to ensure that they are compliant.
How many attempts does the bank need to make in order to get to you to say, listen, we've tried you by email, SMS 5 times, and last resort we're going to...
There's no rules relating to this. It's really about, I think customers must realize and understand that the banks are dealing with huge volumes of people, huge volumes of accounts that they need to go through to ensure that all of the documentation and that there is compliance. So the banks are trying their best to communicate with their clients. And I know you've indicated that you've had people that's known to you that have had their banks frozen.
That's right.
Now, the banks have indicated, they certainly don't want any of their customers to have a bad experience. They want them to continue doing their banking in the normal course of things. They want to be able to give them good service as they can. But the banks are also under this obligation to comply, and if they don't ensure that their clients bring in all the documentation, they're actually forced to then restrict transactions and activity on the account. So they will communicate with the clients, and if the clients don't respond, or think, sometimes clients don't respond because they think they have already been FICA'd, and that's why we're doing this, to say to people, we're creating awareness around the fact that the FICA is not a once-off thing, but neither is there a set time to say that it's got to be done every single time. I think the important thing for bank customers to know is that every time you have a change in respect of your address, your contact details, your employment, you get a new job, you have certain things change in your life that you need to notify your bank about. You need to do it and not wait for the bank to come to you. But for now, in terms of all this that's being done, update your details. The minute your bank communicates with you to say, come in, please heed those communications and go in.
Heed those communications and go in, because also we do see banks that could also be facing fines if they're found not to be.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That was Kalyani Pillay. She is the CEO of SABRIC.